Good evening, everyone. I am Sangeeta Prabhi from the Department of CSE IoT, working in SNS College of Engineering. Today, we are going to see about database design. In previous video, we have discussed about database model and the other types. Now, we are going to discuss about database design. First thing we are going to discuss is entity relationship model. We typically follows the below step for the designing a database from an application. Gather the requirement, functional and data by asking the question to the database user. Do a logical conceptual design of the database. This is where ER model plays a role. It is mostly used graphical representation of conceptual design of a database. Physical database design like indexing and external designs like view. The entity relationship model is for identifying entities like student, car or a company to be represented in database and representation of how those entities are related. The ER model specifies enterprise schema that represents the overall logical structure of database graphically. Why use ER diagram in DBMS? ER diagram represents the ER model in the database, making them easy to convert into relationals. ER diagram provides the purpose of real-world modeling of objects, which makes them internally useful. ER diagram requires no technical knowledge of underlying DBMS used. It gives the standardized solution for visualizing the data logically. Symbols used in ER model. ER model is used to model the logical view of a system from the data representative respectively, which consist of these model. Rectangle. Rectangle represents the entities in ER model. Eclipse. Eclipse represents the attribute in ER model. Diamond. Diamond represents the relationship among the entities. Line. Line represents the attribute to the entities and entity sets with other relationship type. Double ellipse. Double ellipse represents multi-valued attribute. Double rectangle. Double rectangle represents the weak entity. These are the diagrams which we discussed in previous slide. The rectangle box is used as an entity, eclipse box is used as an attribute, diamond is representing the relationship among the entity, and next one is the line that represents the attribute to the entity and the entity set with other relationship type. Double eclipse, multi-valued attribute, double rectangle, weak entity. Next, we are going to see about the components of ER diagram. The components of ER diagram is split into three types. First one is entity, second one is attribute, and the third one is relationship. The first one entity, strong entity, weak entity, attribute, key attribute, composite attribute, multi-valued attribute, derived attribute. Next one relationship, one to one, one to many to one, and many to many. First one is an entity set. An entity set is an object of an entity type, and a set of all entity is called as an entity set. For example, E1 is entity having an entity type student, and a set of all student is called entity set in the ER diagram. The entity type is represented as the given diagram. We can represent the entity in ER diagram but cannot represent the entry in ER diagram because entity is in row and column, and the relation and ER diagram is graphical representation of a data. Next one is the types of entity. There are two types of entity. The first one is strong entity. A strong entity is a type of entity that has a key attribute. The strong entity does not depend on other entity in its schema. It has a primary key that helps in identifying it uniquely, and it is represented by the rectangle. This is called strong entity key, a strong entity type. Weak entity. A weak entity type has a key attribute that uniquely identify each entity in the entity set, but some entity type exists for which key attribute cannot be defined. These are called weak entity types. For example, a company may store the information of the dependents, that is parent, child, spouse, of an employee, but the dependent cannot exist without the employee. So, the dependent will be weak entity type and employee will be identifying entity type for the dependent, which means it is strong entity type. A weak entity type is represented by double rectangle. The participation of weak entity type is always total. The relationship between weak entity type and its identifying strong entity type is called entity relationship, and it is represented by double diamond. See, in this box, the employee is a dependent so that their relations can be included in the database. In this slide, in this topic, we have seen more about the entities and the types of entities. Thank you. Have a nice day.